Corner, the podcast. Where are we? $167, I believe, with boxing's biggest names, boxing's biggest stories, boxing's biggest fights, greatest memories and moments. We do it all with panache and pizzazz. And Lee Groves, the writer, author, historian, CompuBox writer, and most eligible bachelor in friendly West Virginia. How you doing, Lee?
Pretty well, and considering there's 99 people in friendly,
Good response, baby. Good response. Hey, we've got a lot to do. We're going to do some recapping. We're going to do some memories and moments. We have a very special guest, don't we?
We do have a special guest, and we've been trying to get this guy on the show for a couple of years now, and we finally got him. Eric Bottjer, masterful matchmaker.
Yeah, I look forward. He's a longtime friend of mine, and he's a little reclusive like Smitty from time to time. But when he's on, baby. He knows his craft. And let's just get right going. Let's start out with some recapping that I know you have to do, which has to do with last weekend in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, last weekend, the focus of the boxing world was centered on Saudi Arabia. And on that show that streamed on DAZN, prospects Muhammad Alakel and Hayato Tsutsumi scored a pair of early knockouts. Filip Ergovic overcame a nasty eye cut and a perilous eighth round to outpoint David Adelaide. Raymond Ford decision Abraham Nova, and Nick Ball retained his WBA featherweight title by outpointing a very competitive Sam Goodman. But it was the main event between Moses Itauma and Dillian Whyte that earned the most attention, and that attention soared after Itauma destroyed Whyte in less than 2 minutes. At age 20, Itauma is already the WBO's #1 rated contender, and it is the WBO that has the next crack at undisputed champion Alexander Usyk. Now, the WBO has ordered Usyk to fight its interim champion, Joseph Parker, next, but Turki Al-Sheikh wants Itauma to get that shot immediately. First of all, what did your eyes see last Saturday concerning Itauma? Is he the real thing?
Well, I guess it's more about what we haven't seen yet. But I'll answer your question. What I've seen is a guy who, if you stack him up right now at his age, Mike Tyson with his age, and I had to do my breakdown, somewhat not fair to Mike because we saw what would later take place with Mike, but I would say this guy has more intangibles. He's bigger. Mm-hmm. He hits hard. I'd probably give the power nod to Mike, but that only, might be with the left hook. This guy does it with both hands. He does it quicker. Mike had quick hands, but this guy is quicker or just as quick with hand, and his feet are better. Mm-hmm. Mike would do the little pivots and the turning, which was excellent, Customato-esque. But I also see this guy with responsible defense. When he throws a shot, he brings his hands back into proper position. He's a southpaw, which we know what that does to people. So I would say his upside right now on paper and with my eyes is even higher because we might as well go to Tyson because that's what everybody's going to compare him to. Again, he's a bigger guy. He hits just as hard. He does it with both hands. He's got quicker hands, quicker feet, a better athlete. His chin, I have no idea. His stamina, I have no idea. But what I see, I love.
Is he ready for Usyk?
Well, is anybody ready for Usyk? It's not even a fair question. Could he fight him? Would he be okay? Yeah. I'd pick Usyk because Usyk's a genius. But why should Usyk take that fight? First off, Parker deserves the fight, in my opinion, with Usyk. But why would Usyk even do it? Why? And really, to be honest with you, let this kid develop a little bit more. And then if Usyk wants it as a swan song, fine. But if I were Usyk, I would he's done so much. Avoid this young lion, this young killer, and let him do his thing. But everything in boxing is backwards, so who knows what. But it would be more of a danger to Usyk than it would be Itauma getting exposed. Maybe he'd get exposed and outboxed, but Usyk's not, a killer puncher. So I don't think it would be throwing this young lion in with a lion. I think it would be throwing him in with a lion tamer who probably would tame him. But I don't need to see that fight right now. Do you?
Well, I saw all the enthusiasm all over social media, and I was impressed by what I saw. He was poised, he was quick, he was powerful, and he got the job done much quicker than I thought he would. But that said, I think people need to tap the brakes a little bit before declaring that we are now in the era of
Right.
Itauma, and here's why. Yeah, this was a step up fight, but against White, Atama simply did what was expected of him. He knocked out a 37-year-old veteran whose previous three losses were all by knockout. He was heavily favored to do what he just did. His future looks incredibly bright, just like Mike Tyson's future looked when he was on the rise 40 years ago. Later on in the Memories and Moments segment, I'll explain the parallels between the young Mike Tyson's heavyweight environment in 1985 and the one now confronting Itauma in 2025. But as good as Itauma looked, there are still three issues that he must address before we declare him the future of boxing. You brought up two of them. The first is stamina. He has yet to fight past round six. And those back-to-back six-round decision victories took place more than 2 years ago. We don't know how he'll look when he performs over 10 hard rounds, much less 12 if he fights Usyk. The second, what about his chin? We haven't seen him hit with a full-fledged power shot yet. How will he handle himself when he gets buzzed? And finally, his intangibles. Can he fight his way out of trouble? Can he overcome a knockdown? Can he overcome cuts? How well will he fight if his opponent fights back hard?
Yeah, you know what? You're bringing it all up, and you reminded me of what the late great Colonel Bob Sheridan used to always say to me, and it's why he loved Larry Holmes so much. It's the stuff you can't see
Yeah.
that really makes the good the great, and the great the immortals. And you're right on that. What else anything else on that card you want to get to before we get to our special guest?
Well, finishing the point about Atama, there are some guys out there that he can fight to get himself more seasoning. What about Fabio Wardley? He's himself a knockout artist. He's 19-0-1, has a really good knockout record. How about Hergovich, who won on the undercard? Or Agit Kabayel, who is undefeated and has knocked out Arslanbek Makhmutov, Frank Sanchez, and Zhili Zhang in his last three fights. I don't think those fights will get made, but if his team wants to give him the proper seasoning before taking on the likes of Alexander Usyk, those are the fights that can get him that seasoning.
Yeah, good
He
point.
wins all of those.
Yeah.
Hey, full steam ahead.
Yeah, I agree with you. Maybe we'll get Eric Bottjer's thoughts on that.
Yeah. And as far as the undercard is concerned, the Nick Ball Sam Goodman fight, it was a good fight. One judge had it right, 115, 113, but the two other judges, 118, 110, 117, 111, I don't know what fight that they were watching. Sam Goodman put up a good, he acquitted himself well. He lost the fight, the right guy won, but those margins, man, I got to tell you, we seem to run into that a lot in these big fights that, yes, the right guy won, but what about the margins? Man, I don't know what to do about that.
Yeah, well, I know what to do about it. Let's think about it. Let's go to commercial break and come back and chat with Eric Bottjer, outstanding matchmaker for many, many years. Good friend of mine. More with Lee. Eric Bottjer coming up right after this.
I got two options. Option one, I can accept defeat. Option two, I can get up. I can get tougher. I can get faster. I can get stronger. And then I go get mine. I made my choice. Have you made yours?
Back in this corner, the podcast. Boxing's biggest names, boxing's biggest stories, boxing's biggest fights, greatest memories and moments. We'll get to that later on. Right now, let's get to our very special guest. Known him a long time, watched him rise to become one of the outstanding, preeminent matchmakers in all of boxing and I think in all of boxing history. Eric Bottjer joins us. How you doing, Eric?
I'm doing great. How are you guys?
Good to see you, man. Every time I see you at the International Boxing Hall of Fame, you're carrying your court, so to speak, and I'm busy running around trying to take care of the entire damn weekend. But tell the folks exactly what you're doing right now, because you have worked with, and we're going to chronicle this. You've worked with everybody in boxing over the years. What are you doing right now?
Oh, so I'm segueing out of matchmaking, believe it or not, and going into your world. I've been a matchmaker since November of '92. I've done approximately 500 shows, and I think I've done what I can do in this world. And before that, I was a writer and a journalist, and I'm heading back into that. I'm heading back into that neighborhood, so to speak, because we can get into it. It's matchmaking is a different animal than it was when I first jumped on top of this animal. So much different world now.
Yeah, and I heard about your outstanding work with Al Bernstein on Christy Martin had invited me to work two of her shows, and I wasn't able to do it. But it looks like she got some pretty good people, you and Al. And I've always said, Lee, whenever I talk about Eric, what's the first thing I marvel at about him?
His writing ability.
Yeah. Yeah, he is. I was telling my girlfriend Dawn the other day that this guy could win so many awards. Maybe you've won some. You just have a knack with the pen. Although for you pugilistic pups out there, we used to write with pens back in the day. But before we go forward, we started that. Now I'm going to take you back, and then when we get up to speed, you can tell us about the stuff. Now, talk about how you got into boxing in the first place. It has been for you, as most of us, quite the journey.
Yeah, it's a sickness for sure. So, in brief, I was 12 and I was living in South Korea. My father was stationed over there, and I wanted to watch Ali and Ken Norton at Yankee Stadium. The Armed Forces Network could not afford to buy the fight. So I saw a magazine with the gentleman on the cover, and I bought the magazine figuring it would be about the fight. And it was, but it was also about Roberto Duran and Carlos Monzon and all these guys from different parts of the planet who all wore different uniforms and all fought in different weight classes. And I thought, this is different from any sport that I follow right now. This is fascinating. I went to the library. I checked out every book on boxing and the history of boxing. I think we agree here is just wonderful. And at that point, I just knew I was going to be in this world for the rest of my life. I didn't know in what capacity, though.
And how is it? Talk us through. I know you got some jobs writing in the embryonic stages, and how did you get into the writing, and how did that segue into this marvelous matchmaking
I can't even
career?
spell embryonic. That's good. So
Yes, you
I
can.
my dad forced me to go to college, which in retrospect was a very good decision. I didn't want to go, and I didn't know what I was going to study because you can't study boxing in college. So I said, well, I'll study journalism. I love to read, and maybe I can learn how to write. So that's how I became, a professional writer. I got a job out of college in California as a police and courts reporter. I got this little badge that allowed me access into places that I normally couldn't get access to, and discovered that the badge could get me into other places like professional boxing shows. So
Hmm.
I got collared by Lorraine Chargan at one show, and she said, "You're always creeping around here. What are you doing?" And I said, "I just want to get involved in this. I don't know how." And boy, Lorraine Chargan and Don Chargan and Babe Griffin and Joe Gallardi and his matchmaker Ernie Sanchez and all these people were just so wonderful to me. And I was just a kid, and I started to learn about the business of boxing, moved out to the East Coast, still had dreams of being a writer, met Johnny Boz in 1990 at the WBC convention outside the Penta Hotel, and he looked at me and he goes, "You're never going to make a living as a writer." And my face fell, and he said, "You should be a matchmaker." And I said, "What's that?" And he took me to the Blarney Stone and he sat me down and he bought me a hamburger and he explained what that was. And that's how I got into matchmaking.
Yeah. For those of you who, I was going to say, for those of you who don't know Johnny Boz or who he was, you're probably not watching this show anyway. You're watching the other crap. If you don't know who Johnny Boz was, because all of us in this biz know who he was. God, I had some interesting nights with him, and he would remember them all because he wasn't drinking then, and I don't remember most of them. But I know I had a lot of fun as I flipped to Lee Groves.
So it's interesting your word choice, creeping around. That sort of brought a memory up. Jack Obermeyer, J.R. Jowett, those guys, didn't they nickname you the Creep?
Yes.
Is that why?
Jeez.
Yeah.
Is that
So
why they give you the nickname?
no, what happened was I met Jack at the Blue Horizon, and it was my first professional show I ever went to. And I asked for him, and he looked at me and he said, "Why do you want to know who Jack Obermeyer is?" And I explained that I read him. It was him. So I found out that he and Jeff kept track of the towns that they go to. They had a contest, different towns, different states. Jack ended up with more than 400 towns by the end of his career. So I started doing that, and I found out I was living in Virginia at the time that there was a show at the Virginia North Carolina border in Roanoke Rapids, North Carolina. So I told Jack and Jeff. Jack couldn't go. Jeff drove 10 hours each way and called Jack up and said, "Your creep friend sent me all the way down here for a tough man contest. It doesn't count." So he was not happy. Jack thought that was hilarious, and that's how I got that name.
Oh my goodness, great story. But flipping back over to matchmaking, how would you describe your matchmaking philosophy?
So the first thing is I'm a fan. So you have to consider the person buying the ticket going to see the show, does this fight fit in the show? You can't, unfortunately, we'd all have to like 50-50 fights from top to bottom. That's not financially feasible, especially for smaller shows. Also, younger fighters that are considered prospects are not going to fight such types of fights. They're going to fight type fights against opponents and veterans and journeymen and whatnot. And sometimes, as we used to call them, stiffs, tomato cans, bums, which are terrible names, but they exist in the lexicon of boxing. So you try to make a couple of even fights. You try to make a couple of fights where prospects are being developed and they get some value out of the fights that they have. You try to put on a fighter or two that sells tickets. So you have a balance. So you don't want a show with a bunch of first or second round knockouts, and don't want a bunch of guys going the distance and winning 6-0, 8-0, 10-0 decisions. So it's a recipe for a soup or a cake or whatever you want. And, sometimes it works out where it tastes good and sometimes it tastes like garbage. So, going in, you try to make the best cake possible and but understanding that you are limited by just the reality of what you're dealing with, that people, especially nowadays, don't want to fight competitively.
The matchmaker is it's probably the most challenging of the jobs that there is in boxing because you have so many
Hey
audience.
Lee, before you finish that question, yeah, when I think of matchmakers, I one good thing I've already seen Eric smile a little bit during this, which I probably never saw when he was matchmaking. They all look, Lee, and Eric might agree. They all look like they're just thinking about jumping off that cliff, like they're just moments away from heading over the cliff because of all the pressures and all the different people that are after them for multiple type of reasons. As I let you finish, but I'm glad we saw Eric smile there. So.
Yeah, he's got
Always
good.
smile when I see you guys. Now you guys can pay me for that remark after the show.
Will do. Um, as I was saying, there's so many audiences that you have to satisfy. You have to satisfy the fighters, the managers, the promoters, the TV network sometimes. It's a delicate balancing act. How do you handle that balance?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's just experience to where you get to a point where you realize, okay, I know what I'm doing here. So, and the criticisms come, and you only take the criticisms that are valid seriously. Like if I have some promoter, and most promoters don't know what the hell they're looking at, and some promoter criticized me for a fight, if he's right, and it's always been a he, I'll take the criticism, and I'll work to get better. And if he's wrong, I'll just say okay and shake my head and say, this fellow doesn't know what the hell they're talking about, and I'm just continuing to do the job the best that I can. So every show you learn something. Nobody does a perfect show, matchmakers included. I don't care how many shows you do, you're going to make mistakes. So one thing I will comment on is that and matchmakers are guilty of this, where they'll say, "Oh, I got this guy beat," right? Almost proudly that they got, some fighter that was supposed to win lost the fight. Oh, they didn't get him beat. That fighter either won or lost the fight on their own merits and their own performance and so forth. So matchmakers, some of them think that they have a little more control that they do, I think, for their ego. Anytime I've done a show that turns out terrific, it's mostly because of the fighters. They are the ones that have performed. So I give them most of the credit. And I'm not going to criticize them, but sometimes they don't perform. And that's not the matchmaker's fault either. If the guy shows up and he's just there to collect a check, that's something to where, all right, you live and learn, that not to trust this person for the next, when they're being offered to you again.
One of the major hazards of a matchmaker is they have to deal with last minute cancellations. And take us through the process of finding a late replacement. You get that call, Bottjer, find somebody.
Yeah, there's
What do
a
you
lot
do
of
after you get
there's
that
a lot
call?
of car accidents and family deaths that happen 48 hours before weigh-ins. It's like an epidemic. I don't remember the fighter's name, but I do remember his mom died more than once. So
Jeez. But
and so the process is it was different back in the day, as they say nowadays. I have a finite number of people that I trust. I immediately let them know, hey, I'm looking and I will pay you handsomely. Please help out. And then you go through the active list on BoxRec and see who's been fighting, especially if you're doing it in California or Nevada, New York, New Jersey. You need guys with medical tests that fall within the limits of those states. So I look at the last 6 to 12 months for fighters that have fought in those states and to see if they have medicals and then contact them directly. And, once the word gets out, it's a feeding frenzy. It's everyone wants to get a buck. So everyone starts making calls. Sometimes that can be counterproductive because certain agents will offer the same fighter different amounts of money. Unfortunately that happens. It's nobody's fault. Everyone's just trying to do their best. So back, back in the day, again, I was able to fill those fights routinely. Now it's not routine. Now, if I lose a fight, especially in New Jersey or New York, 2 to 3 days out, boy, that's a hard task. Sometimes I fail.
Unbelievable. What was your most memorable substitution? And was there a last minute match that you put together for which you are particularly proud?
Yeah, the best show I've ever done, and they were both replacement fights, was an HBO show. And I don't remember the original fights, but what we ended up with was Oleg Moskayev and Hasim Rahman
Mm.
and Derek Jefferson and Maurice Harris. So I don't think you're going to find a better heavyweight doubleheader that HBO ever showed. Rockman ended up flying out of the ring and being knocked out in
That
an
was in
upset.
Vegas, right? That was in
That
Vegas,
was in
wasn't it?
Atlantic City.
Oh, Atlantic City.
Yeah,
Okay.
that was in Atlantic City. And of course Jefferson, on the verge of being knocked out himself, hit Maurice Harris with a left hook and
Oh,
knocked
that's
him
right. Yeah.
stone cold
Hmm.
out. So resulting in Larry Merchant, I remember literally yelling into the microphone, Derek Jefferson, I love you.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah. I
so I was
remember.
really proud of that because those were fights that I actually made myself, and they were both of them were replacement fights. And I think whatever the originals were, would not have been that good.
You said that you're transitioning from matchmaking back to writing, but if you were still active in the matchmaking world and if you had to make five particular matches and you had the power to do it, what would be those matches and why?
You mean current fighters?
Yeah, current fighters.
So, you know, even though he didn't perform last time, I always thought Ryan Garcia and Teofimo Lopez would be a terrific fight because you have two guys that have wonderful talent, aren't consistent. You don't know what you're going to get. You know, I always thought that would be a good, you know, sort of proving ground for one of these guys to say, hey, look, you know, if you're gonna be a top level fighter, you got to win a fight like this. You know, you go to the heavyweights. Look, you know, everyone wanted to see Tyson Fury fight Joshua for a while. I think that fight has kind of died, unfortunately, and not because of Tyson Fury, quite frankly, or even Joshua and Deontay Wilder. People wanted to see that, and I know Wilder accepted that fight multiple times. You know, and I'm not saying Joshua like ducked it himself, but I mean, I just they should have made those fights. I mean, it's you know Anthony Joshua whenever he's done with his career and they ask him, he just did not fight the two guys that he was supposed to fight. Mute that. And you know, some of the fights are being made. Crawford and Canelo is a fascinating fight. I don't know if that would have been in my five, but I'm definitely going to watch it. Better be Evan Beevil. They fought twice. You know, so these fights that have never been made in the recent past are being made. So if I could pick more of these guys, look, uh, the fellow that Moses Itauma, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing his last name right. I'd like to see him fight anybody, right? I'd like to see that guy fight anybody.
Yeah.
This reminds me of Joe Louis.
Yeah.
I mean, just that kind of talent and that kind of confidence at that age is remarkable. So anytime he fights, I want to watch it. You know, I'd love, one of the fights I wanted to see recently, I suggested, which is not going to happen, was Inoue and Lomachenko at 126. I would have loved to have seen that fight. But Lomachenko's retired, which I think is a wonderful decision, and we're not going to see that. In a way, Akhmadaliev is a terrific matchup.
You also said that you asked about current day fighters. Was there a match from the past that you would have liked to have matched?
Well, you'd like to see Riddick Bowe fight Lennox Lewis in 1992.
Yeah,
for sure.
I mean, Lennox Lewis was obviously over time the greater fighter. Lennox Lewis is, if he's not in your top 10 all-time heavyweights, you don't have a correct list. And Riddick Bowe is not. But from 1990 to 1992, when Bowe won the heavyweight championship, there was not a better heavyweight. I'm not saying Lewis was less than him, but there was not a better heavyweight in the world at that point. And Lewis certainly was at that level because he had just destroyed Razor Ruddock in the same time frame that Holyfield had lost. Bowe had beaten Holyfield. So that's the one that immediately comes to mind. I can go back to when I was watching boxing in the 70s as a kid. I'd love to see John Conte fight Victor Galindez. I'd love to see Carlos Palomino fight Pepino Cuevas. I love these split champ, Pedroza against Salvador Sanchez.
Yeah.
These guys in the 80s were terrific, great fighters. And because of the way the business had devolved at that point, they were not fighting each other.
Yeah. Eric Bottjer is with us, and we got more with Eric Bottjer. We also have some memories and moments. By the way, I'm working on getting Moses on the program. I'm sure he will enjoy and I'm not one to heap a lot of praise on people in the incipient or embryonic stages of their careers, but I will him. My eyes, like Bert Sugar said to me one time, you got the best eyes in boxing. My eyes tell me this kid is special, but there's stuff we don't know yet. We'll be back. Back in this corner of the podcast, a buck 67, and chatting with one of my favorite people in boxing, Eric Bottjer, one of the few guys I would actually hang around. I am known as being you're just as reclusive as I am, though. Man, you know how to hide from people. But we've had some pretty good times over the years, haven't we?
We've had a wonderful time, and I'll tell you what, I mean, we haven't been together for years. We do see each other in the Hall of Fame, and we always say we got to get together.
Yeah.
I know you're super busy all the time. You run that portion of the Hall of Fame, and I know you don't sleep very much when you're there and so forth. But I'll tell you, it's so gratifying to see that,
Yeah.
because I know what you have built, that you have done this on your own. And that's really hard to do in our world, really tough to do. It's something that I hope to do, and I'm very excited to do this, but I also know how difficult it is. And for what you've done, Smitty, is nothing short of extraordinary to me. So, man, I hope you realize that people in our world know that.
No, I really do appreciate that. I am so proud of, I can't even believe, I was looking at pictures of Hank Kaplan and myself the other day, and I can't believe when he had told me, you keep that show on for 10 years, you're headed whatever. And now it's 21 years and my show is still on. But like you, I'm making some changes too. And I announced it. I'm getting ready to franchise in this corner to other parts of the globe where boxing is more popular. I don't mean to be negative, Nelly, and certainly I'll appreciate your comments after I'm done here, but I don't think boxing will ever come back in this country the way it once was, the way you and I grew up in it. And that'll lead me to asking you, where the hell are we with boxing? Not globally. We can talk about that in a minute, but in America.
That's a great question. So I have some optimism, because if you would have asked me this question, I don't know, a couple of years ago, it's being on the business side, it's as dark as it's ever been. Like, I mean, boxing has really, I use the word devolved, to where it's the only sports business, especially in this country, where the business model is the best athletes don't compete against each other. And you wonder why this last generation of sports fans have gone away from boxing. Boxing, the sport itself didn't change. It's just the product is terrible. The promoters put out a really lousy product. They've been aided by that with the platforms that put out the product and the sanctioning bodies that have sanctioned this stuff. So it's, I can't name all the world champions right now. I cannot name them, and that's ridiculous. Mm-hmm. So what the Saudis are doing, they're being criticized. Are they doing things perfectly? Well, they're not going to do things perfectly in anybody's eyes. But all I know is, as a fan, I'm seeing fights that I would have not have seen 2 or 3 years ago. And that's the start of something that, at least, I don't know if it's going to turn around, Smitty, like you said, and bring it back to where it was. I think that would take a lot of time to even get close to that. But at least I think, stop the hemorrhaging of people just leaving this world and not looking at it anymore. And maybe by putting these shows, for example, on Netflix, right? There was a huge story in the New York Times today about the fact that 6 million viewers watched Amanda Serrano and Katie Taylor. I think that's about 2% of the total viewership of Netflix, which doesn't sound like a lot, but 6 million viewers is a lot of people to watch a boxing event. A major pay-per-view nowadays will do less than 1 million buys. And then 38 million watch Tyson and Jake Paul. And regardless of what you think of the actual Tyson-Jake Paul fight, for them to get that many viewers and that many new subscribers to Netflix, I think is wonderful. And I think lowering the pay-per-view prices is wonderful. So, but the bottom line is, as long as the product is good, as long as you put out a good product, over time, people will buy the product.
Lee?
Well, we described how just voluminous your career was. And in that voluminous career, you got to work with a lot of terrific people, very powerful people. So I want to play a little game of name association. You give us a little thumbnail of what instantly leaps to your mind when I
Sure.
mention these names. Don King.
Oh, Don King, I did a piece on him on a Facebook page a few years ago where he is the epitome of America, so to speak. He has done unbelievably um, wonderful events that I think only he could have pulled off. Ali Frazier in Manila, Ali Foreman in Africa, and so forth and so on. But he also did some really horrid stuff as well that only I think he could have done. So he is the best and the worst about what this country sometimes represents, and certainly the boxing business being sort of the Wild West of very few regulations and rules and laws and morals. That only he could have existed. Only he could have used that to exist. I mean, he can't. He's not going to go to the NFL and get a team, or Major League Baseball and get a team. But Don King became Don King because of the way boxing is.
Louis DeCubas,
Senior or junior?
Sr.
He's one of my real friends. He's one of the few promoters that I've ever met that actually know what they're looking at. And I don't know if this has ever been said about Louis. I've never heard him say a negative word about anybody in this business, and that's rare. He is always a very positive person. Sean Gibbons as well. Same. When I think of those two guys, other than they're my friends, they don't criticize people. They don't try to climb on people to elevate themselves. They're just very knowledgeable and they enjoy what they do.
Jack Fisk.
Oh, he's my mentor. He's a guy I contacted in college, and I went down to see him at the Chronicle newspaper, and we just became friends. And I miss him so much. And he was just straightforward. Very, he could be dry. When I asked him for the wonderful advice, I thought I was going to get this magical formula to succeed in boxing, and all he said, you got to work hard. And he also, but the one thing he did impart to me goes, the first thing I'm going to tell you is always remember this is a business first. Never forget it's a business. It's sort of like the line in Watergate. When you can't figure something out, you follow the money.
Yeah.
Cedric Kushner.
Cedric Kushner was my most wonderful time in boxing, working with him. He's a man with a grade school education who achieved remarkable things in professional boxing and in the music business, but he was just a fun guy. He was just a guy that loved life. I mean, and just loved the business, and he made it, and he hired young people like me. We were all young, and we made a ton of mistakes, and he tolerated them. And I couldn't have learned from somebody better than him.
What great times I had then. Heavyweight Explosion. I worked some of those in. How can I ever forget Thunderbox? Oh, jeez. Ron Rizzo popped into my head. Yeah, we had some great times. And in fact, on many occasions, Eric would be the one, him or Rizzo would be the one handing me my check, and I'll always rush into the bank to make sure that thing would clear. But I really loved Cedric Kushner. He was Alfred Hitchcock with some hair, I guess. Go ahead, Lee. Sorry to interrupt you there.
Roy Jones Jr.
Oh boy, Roy Jones, if you don't know him, you might have a different impression of him than people that know him. What I found out about Roy, and I hope he takes this the right way, he's just a hillbilly. He's just a guy who loves to hang out, and he trusts people that are around him locally, and he hunts and fishes and all that. He's just a homebody, man. He's also one of the two best fighters I've ever seen in person. And I saw an interview with him about, they were talking about speculating on how he would have done it against this guy. I forget who the guy was, and he said, "Look, when I was 175 pounds, I wasn't losing to anybody," and I agree with that.
Art Palulo.
Artie was a guy I worked with for 8 years. He's another guy I consider a friend. Artie and I still talk socially. Artie was of an era to where he was a casino guy. He had these wonderful relationships with casinos. And also, back when ESPN and even USA Network was doing boxing, they entrusted him to give them quality shows. And Artie gambled one time, and he gave some money to Ricky Hatton, and that turned out pretty well for him. And of course, what made him, and he'll tell you this, to bring him into the upper tier of promoters was when Marcelino Freitas beat Joel Casamayor for the
Yes.
world championship, and Freitas had a number of title, I think almost 14 or 15 title defenses. So that's what a promoter needs, is they need a whale, so to speak, to feed all the minnows that they have that are trying to develop, and already achieved that.
Lou DiBella.
Lou DiBella is another friend of mine. He's made the wise move to segue out of boxing and into the baseball world. I mean, if you want to know what's wrong with boxing, call Lou. He's going to tell you, sure. Uh, and if you call him on different days, you might hear different things. But I'll tell you, I had surgery a couple of years ago. It saved my life, and I had disappeared. I was at a show in New York, and I was struck very quickly. And Lou DiBella went to the police and went from hospital to hospital with cops until they found me. I
Wow.
don't know of anybody that would have done that other than Lou. I will always consider him a friend.
Last one, Eddie Hearn.
He's a narcissist. So I'll be fair to him. He can sell ice to Eskimos. He is a wonderful salesman. But unfortunately, because of his narcissism, he thinks that he can do your job and my job and other people's job better than anybody else. And he doesn't get to know people personally at all. They don't matter to him as human beings. So, these guys fired me from my job a day after my mom died. So
Mm,
I don't know what qualifies you to be a complete human being, but that fails you in my mind.
for sure. And
Well,
last question, go ahead.
well, no, get your last one in, and then we'll let Eric get out of here. Go ahead.
Okay, yeah, last question. The boxing world is gearing up for next month's super fight between Canelo Alvarez and Terrence Crawford. A couple years ago, that fight would have been seen as absurd, but now
But not with
opinions are
us. It wasn't.
divided.
We did an entire damn show on it where I broke down the fight in every category. But go ahead.
Yeah, they were number one and number two pound for pound at the time we were comparing and contrasting them. But now, there are more than a few people that are picking Crawford. How do you size up that fight as a matchmaker?
It's a fascinating fight. There was a revelatory interview I saw with Crawford recently that was done less than 3 years ago, where he poo-pooed the idea himself and said, "I'm not fighting above 154 pounds max," right? So he's had a change of heart. I think money has a lot to do with that change of heart, but I also think that Crawford, being a highly intelligent athlete, has seen Canelo's decline, that Canelo does not punch in combination anymore. He is not as fleet on his feet as he was before. And Canelo himself used to be stuck in the mud. And after the Mayweather fight, learned about footwork and improved drastically. Canelo Alvarez is an all-time great fighter. He's one of the best 10 middleweights, in my opinion, who's ever lived. I think people, when they look back at Canelo and Golovkin, their first two fights, will realize that those were about as good as you can get in a prize fight, at least for this era. Crawford, he doesn't have the resume of Canelo. He's not the size of Canelo, but Crawford is still, I think, an animal, so to speak, where I think Canelo has turned into more of a businessman. And sometimes the animal, even if they don't have the advantages, will beat the businessman because they want it more. I'm not saying Canelo doesn't want to win this fight, but he has become a businessman over the last couple of years. You see it with certain fighters when they reach a point where the money becomes more important than anything else. Not that money is not important. So I give Crawford a real chance in this fight because of his style, because of his ability, and because of that aspect where I think Canelo, when he fought Bivol had he fought Bevel 3 years prior to when he actually fought him, he would have done anything he could to have clawed his way back into that fight and try to win the fight. He did not try to win that fight at the end. He was just going along to get along and hoping to get a decision. I don't think Crawford's there yet. So that's what makes it fascinating to me. If you're going to bet on the fight, you bet the underdog, and I think the underdog is Crawford.
Yeah. That's just why.
I still think Canelo's gonna win the fight, but I see Crawford as a really live dog here.
That's why I'm working on getting my pal Ray Leonard on the program, even though everything was different styles and all that. I see Ray as Crawford, and I see Hagler as Canelo.
Absolutely,
yeah,
absolutely.
So
Perfect
what can we
comparison.
look forward to? And I hopefully will keep getting you back on the program as we follow your journey, writing, matchmaking, back to and you're a hell of a broadcaster. I've even suggested you working with me when I was doing stuff on the circuit all the time. Hopefully we can work together sometime. Tell us what you're looking forward and what we can look for in the future with Eric Bottjer.
Yeah, I was just literally going to say that, and not to be joking, boy, if I could do a broadcast with you at one point, that would be really cool, man. That would be a lot of fun, and I think people would enjoy it. I don't have a definitive plan other than I'm going to do a couple of more shows as a matchmaker. They're scheduled in September and October and November, and that's it. But I've already started to get into the habit. I'm doing more broadcasts. I'm practicing more writing. I'm going to do a podcast. So yeah. So this is what I want to do. So I will figure it out as I go, so to speak. But we're storytellers, right? This is the whole idea is to tell stories. I have a lot of stories to tell. I'm interested in having people on that can tell their own story and let them be the star of the show, so to speak. I appreciate you guys doing with that me today. It's a lot of fun. And yeah, I'm looking forward to it, and I'll be calling for advice for sure.
Yeah, well, you have any time. One of the things I found, I did not know this because a lot of people say I have the biggest ego in boxing, despite my 5'6.5" diminutive stature. But what I have found out, I enjoy doing more than anything, and Lee is one that really pushed me with this. Is I love mentoring and helping other young broadcasters I would love to work with. Even though they might consider it competitive, I would love to work with two fighters that are doing boxing as commentators because I don't see them improving. They fall into a narrative, and what they should be doing is telling us what we can't see or what, and
exactly.
And I won't mention any names. And I have worked with a few of them. Love to work with you. Always great seeing you, my friend. You're one of my favorite people in the sport, and continued good success, and just as important, good health, and look forward to seeing you soon.
Give me 5 seconds here. I want to do something very quickly.
Okay.
It will be illegal. Hold on.
Okay.
Okay.
I don't know what he has. I don't know what he has planned for us. We're not going to go to break. By the way, when we come back, the final segment.
Oh,
there
yes.
it is. Come to box.
Yep. I was looking at this last night. I read it before when it came out, and I was get this book. It's wonderful. It's fascinating. It's completely factual.
Yeah.
But it's if you're a Muhammad Ali fan and you want to know the statistical and factual stories of his fights, boy, it's there. It's amazing stuff. So get that book by a fella, Lee Groves and Bob Canobio.
Yes. And he quotes me in that book because I spent so much time with Ali back at the Fifth Street Gym. And when when Lee told me he was going to write this book, he was wondering what my thoughts would be, because everybody, thinks of Ali as this defensive master. And what I watched with great sadness towards the end is one of Ali's greatest attributes was something that would obviously put him in the situation that he was in, and that was the ability to take a punch, because he got hit a lot. He got hit a lot.
Yeah, Roy was kind of like that too,
Yes.
where these guys were geniuses. So they didn't have to box like normal boxers are taught to box, because they could do what they wanted to. And then when Ali couldn't do that anymore, you're right, he made the horrible discovery that he was one of the toughest human beings that's ever walked the planet. And unfortunately, he paid for it, and nobody protected him.
Yeah. Love you, brother. Eric Bottjer, We're going to take
Thank
a little
you.
break. We'll come back. Memories and moments. Moses Itauma, how does he compare to the 20-year-old Iron? Or was it? No, it was Iron Mike Tyson back then. We'll be back.
I got two options. Option one, I can accept defeat. Option two, I can get up. I can get tougher. I can get faster. I can get stronger. And then I go get mine. I made my choice. Have you made yours?
Back, final segment in this corner of the podcast. That last couple of segments, great stuff. I don't think people realize the small fraternity that is boxing, this global sport, which it seems like only a handful of us are really and have been involved in. I know now with social media, you got everybody with a podcast, you got everybody with a YouTube channel. Most of them absolutely know less than zero, one of my favorite movies, less than zero about boxing. But Lee Groves doesn't. And when we discussed putting together this show, which, by the way, Lee's the executive producer and does so much work for me, to take away from me having to do. He does, so much, from the skeleton of the show to being on the show and then putting together with our outstanding editor, Jack Quinn, so much. So sometimes I forget to thank you for that on camera. Thank you for that. And when we were talking about Moses Itauma and we went back and forth, you came back to me hours later and texted me and said, hey, maybe we should do what you're going to do right now.
Yeah, I see a parallel between the very young Mike Tyson, who was up and coming in 1985. He was 19 years old then, and the 20-year-old Moses Itauma. And it seemed like both Tyson and Itauma is the representation of the next wave of boxing history. Tyson was poised to take over the heavyweight division that was well established then. And Moses Itauma is poised to take over, if things work out right, the same way that Tyson did. It seemed like a changing of the guard was going to take place, and it was almost inevitable. So I took the liberty of digging into the vault to view the heavyweight landscape of August 1985, 40 years ago, and peeking at the heavyweight picture of today. So let's go back to 1985, the year in which Tyson turned pro and fought an incredible 15 times to establish the foundation for what would be a tremendous rise toward contender status. Now, this was the heavyweight environment that he was facing, according to the Ring Magazine ratings as of August 11th, 1985. And you will see those ratings right here. Now, like today, there was a figure that towered above everybody else, and his name was Larry Holmes. Yes, he was the IBF champion, but he was also the lineal champion, thanks to his victory over Muhammad Ali in October 1980. And like Usyk, Holmes was undefeated. He was 48-0, in fact, and he was preparing to fight his first match against then undisputed light heavyweight champion Michael Spinks. At age 35, Holmes was well past his chronological prime, but he was still heavily favored to beat Spinks and to tie Rocky Marciano's immortal 49-0 career record. Now, in retrospect, the division is pretty deep because 8 of the top 10 fighters here either were or would become champions sometime during their careers. Pinklin Thomas, the number 1 contender, was the WBC champion, while the next 3 names, Tim Witherspoon, WBA champion Tony Tubbs, and Greg Page, were derisively referred to by one columnist as the Fat Boys for their less than stellar training habits. The next 5 were the hard-hitting Harry Coetzee, the rough-and-tumble Trevor Berbick, the ever-dangerous Mike Weaver, Carl the Truth Williams, Michael Dynamite Dokes, and David Bay, who some at the time was picked to beat Larry Holmes. And if you look closely at the number 13 contender, there was a James Smith there. Now, even though you fought around that time, this James Smith was James Bone Crusher Smith.
Yeah, there's that James Smith right there against the Haitian kid. And yeah, go ahead.
So at the time of these rankings, Tyson was 19 years old, and all the big names were much older. Holmes was 35. Pinklin Thomas, Tim Witherspoon, and Tony Tubbs, they were 27. Page was 26. Coetzee was 30. Berbick was 31. Weaver was 34. Williams was 25. Dokes was 27. And Bay was 28. Tyson ended up beating several of these men, all by knockout. Thomas, Tubbs, Berbick, Williams, and Holmes in the top 10. And he also defeated Tony Tucker, Bone Crusher, and Bruno twice. He knocked out Marvis Frazier, Mitch Blood Green, and Jesse Ferguson. The young Tyson, whatever you may think of him as far as where he places in history, he essentially cleared out the division as of 1985. Now let's look at today's ratings. And like today, we have a grand old man at the top, 38-year-old undisputed champion Alexander Usyk, the man who beat the previous man, Tyson Fury, not once but twice. Holmes was a first ballot Hall of Famer, and Usyk will be a first ballot Hall of Famer when his time comes. And like in 1985, we have a good mix of older lions and young guns. Joseph Parker, he's the WBO secondary champion. He's 33 years old. And thanks to his back-to-back-to-back victories over Deontay Wilder, Zhilei Zhang, and Martin Bakole, he has earned his shot against Usyk. He should fight Usyk next. Next up is Germany's Agit Kabayel, who at 32 is undefeated and is on a terrific run. Next is 27-year-old former champion Daniel Dubois, fresh off his second KO loss to Usyk, and 35-year-old former champion Anthony Joshua, who was last seen being knocked out by Dubois. The number 6 spot belongs to 33-year-old Filip Hrgovic, who defeated David Adeleye last weekend, and the next 3 spots belong to knockout artists Fabio Wardley, who is 30, Zhilei Zhang, who's 42, and Martin Bakole, who is 33. And rounding out the list is 31-year-old F.A. Ajagba. So if you take the average ages of the two eras, it was 28.8 in 1985 and 30.4 in 2025. Tyson was 9 years younger than the top heavyweights of his time, and Moses Itauma is a decade younger than the top heavyweights of today. Now, will Itauma run the table like Tyson did? We'll see. But that's my assessment.
That was fantastic. Tyson's rise was one of the most meteoric we've ever seen in any sport at the time. And part of it was because he fought like 15 times, you said, I think as a pro, 14 or 15 times, something like that.
First year. Yeah.
But I'll go back to what I said, and you can just give me a yes or a no.
Okay.
I think, again, his upside, Itauma, size, dexterity, power the same, maybe a little less, combination punching, athleticism. I see more possible pluses than I would have said for Tyson at that time.
Mm-hmm.
Agree or not?
Agreed. He has the size. He has the speed. He has a southpaw stance.
Yeah.
He has the right hook. You don't see that often with southpaws. And he does the right hook with power. You had to look very closely to see that final punch land, but it had a definite effect.
Oh, I saw it. Yeah.
Dillian Whyte. Yeah.
I saw it, and Dillian Whyte felt it, no doubt.
Mike Tyson was a meteor. I am very, very impressed by the form that he showed, the power that he showed in both hands, the speed in that blocky body of his. It seemed incongruous with the way he was built. But Itauma has very good gifts as well. We still don't know about his chin, his stamina, and his intangibles. But if he has all 3 of those aspects, he is poised to put together a potentially historic run at the top.
And by the way, I think that Itauma can do more inside the ring if he keeps improving. Hopefully, I don't even know who his trainer is. But if he keeps improving, Mike was going to be one-way traffic. Mike's one way. Mm-hmm. The greats of the greatest have different ways they can win and can find different ways to win. Crawford and Canelo are going to show us which one of those can do it in just less than a month now. Want to thank Eric Bottjer for joining us. Great that we finally can check that one off the list, but we'll check him back on the list and get him on again in the very near future, especially with the things he's working on doing in journalism and broadcasting. Want to thank Lee Groves. Great stuff. I love that last segment, that comparison to Tyson and Itauma was fantastic. I think both of the fighters would even agree with that. I don't know if Mike would like my assessment or not, but anyway, I'll just end it by saying so long, everybody.